Hi everyone, my name is Amanda Walker and I am a BCBA. I'll be showing you today how to collect data and how to graph that data using Google Forms. What's neat about Google Forms is that you're able to take the data electronically, and once you press submit, you're able to view that data immediately. You can set it up to where it's graphed the way you want it to be graphed each time that you press submit. And you can also share this link with the rest of your behavioral team, and you can use it on the computer, on a tablet, or even on your phone. So before we get started, you're going to want to make sure you have or make a Google email account or a Gmail account. So to get to Google Forms, you can either type in the link or you can Google Google Forms, which is what we'll do now. We'll click on the Google Forms link, go to Google Forms, and I am in the account that I would like to be. However, if you have multiple accounts, you'll want to make sure that you are in the Gmail account that you wish to create your form in. So to get started, we will click on blank form. And your first page here is where I like to set up as my first page of what it will look like on my data collection form, which I like to put the date. At the top here on Untitled Form, I'm going to put the client's initials. I'm going to use my dog's initials here since this is just a practice form. So I will put OW Data Collection. And I want to put initials because this is not HIPAA compliant. This document can be public, so put the initials and no other identifying information. You definitely don't want to put the first and last name. Underneath the initials and the data collection, I'm going to head and go and put what exactly will be on this data collection. Skill acquisition and maladaptive behaviors is what I will put here. For untitled question, again, I mentioned that I like my first form, my first section of my form to be the date. And the date should be a necessary part of your form because without the date of your session, it's going to be difficult to obviously know which data goes with which date. So you'll see that when I typed date, it automatically switched to the date format. However, if it doesn't do that, you can go here and select date. We're going to be playing with the other options here for our next sections for the actual data collection. Now you have the option to make any of your sections required. And so since we want the date to be required for any data collection, I'm going to click required here. So now that I have my date here, you can also add in, if you want, a section to where you could put therapist name. So if you have multiple therapists on a client, you might find it useful to add a section to where the therapist can put their name in. So if you want in this section to add anything else, you can go over here to add question, click on add question, and here we'll put therapist name. So it automatically switched this to short answer for me. However, I could maybe switch this to multiple choice or any other format that I felt necessary, but short answer will work for this. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to add another section. Anytime you add a section, you're adding another page to your form. So keep that in mind as you are making your data collection sheet to think about how many different sheets you want or how many different pages you want on your form. So I'm going to add this section, and I'm going to use this section for my skill acquisition data collection. I have an option here to add a description. However, I'm just going to leave that blank for now. I could put in here replacement behaviors. So I have the general idea of what the section 2 is going to be, and now I can add a question. So for each question, I'm going to use this for our skill acquisitions for each program. So let's say that on the first program, I want to track manding. And maybe I want to track manding for a specific item like juice. Mand for juice. So that's my first program. And how I want to collect this data is I want to do it by trials. I want 5 trials. And I want to track independent responses, prompted responses, and refusal or incorrect responses. So how I'm going to set this skill up is to use a checkbox grid. So here is my checkbox grid. For the rows, I'm going to use my prompt levels. Independent response, prompted, and refusal. So I'm going to set this up as 5 trials in my column set. So if I wanted to add additional prompting levels, if I wanted to add a visual prompt, a partial physical prompt, I can add as many as I want in there. And if I wanted additional trials, I can add as many trials as I wanted. So we are still in section 2, and I want to keep all of my skill acquisition data in section 2. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this first question so that all I have to do for the second one is change the program. So maybe for this one, I'm going to say mands for cookie. We'll add an S here. Mands for juice. Okay. So we're on the second one, mands for cookie. And this is set up the way that I wanted it, just like the first one. And for some reason, if I wanted to take different data on here, if I wanted to change the prompt levels or the number of trials, I can change that. If not, we're ready to go on to the third program. So it duplicated from the second one. And let's say that we wanted to work on, for this one, eye contact. So makes eye contact with speaker within 3 seconds for 3 seconds. These are all just hypothetical. So I want to keep my prompt levels the same, my levels the same, my trials the same. So I can just continue duplicating and changing the question for as many trials as I need. I like to have a separate skill acquisition section and a separate section for maladaptive behaviors. So what I'm going to do now is go over here and go to add section. And remember, when I'm adding a section, I'm adding a new page to my form. So now I am on section 3. And On section 3, I'm going to title this Maladaptive Behaviors. And you can leave this blank. You could put something like deceleration, target behaviors. And then we can go ahead and add our first question. So for here, we are looking at the target behaviors that we want to decrease, such as aggression. And what I like to put for this section is I like to change the format to short answer. And this will allow us to either put in tally marks here or to put in the actual number of aggressions, and the forms will let us go back and forth to change that number as the session goes. So I put in aggression here, I change it to short answer. So I'm just going to duplicate this and then put in our next behavior. And okay, now that I have my maladaptive behaviors in here, I can go back and just look through my form. I have my date section, which is required. I have my skill acquisition session with my different programs, and I have my maladaptive behaviors. I can also add a section in for parent training data or any other type of data. Sometimes I like to add a comment section, and it automatically, you can see, just change it to long answer text. And you can change it obviously to whatever you'd like, but sometimes adding a comment section is nice so I can go through and immediately see something that one of my behavior texts have written. Okay, so now that I have that, I can click on this icon here, this eye icon, to preview. So I have my form here. This is what the form will look like when you send it to anybody or when you take data on it. So I'll go ahead and I will put in the date. And I'll press next. And now if I press next and I did not put in the date, it will not let me go to next. So this is what the form will look like. And you can see I have my program here. I have my prompt levels, I have my trials. So let's say for the first trial, our OW client received an independent, so I'm going to click independent. For our second trial, let's say it was independent again. For our third, let's say refusal, fourth refusal, and fifth prompted. So you can see that it's very clear on where you should be selecting your prompt level per trial. And we'll go ahead and we'll just put some other data in some of these. And so now that I am on my skill acquisition page and I filled in my data for that, I can go over to next, and I am now on my maladaptive behaviors. And let's say so far we've had one aggression and one elopement, but our session is still going, so I can hit the back button and go back to skill acquisition, put in what I need. Then I can go to next to get back to my maladaptive behaviors, and we've had more aggressions. We've had another aggression, so I'm going to change this 1 to a 2, and now we've had a proper data destruction. So it's nice because I can go back and forth without losing that data. So once I have completed all of my data for the session, I can go ahead and press submit. Once I press submit, it gives me the option to submit another response, but if we're done for the day, we don't need to do that. So I can go back to where I created the form to look at that response. So I'm just going to, you can fill in here what you would like to name your Google form. It automatically labeled it OW data collection. I'd like to keep that the same. So just to show you where you would find that form would be in your account on Google Forms. It will keep all of your forms there. So I'll just go ahead and click back on my OW data collection. And up here where it says responses, it says I have one response. I will click on that and it will bring us to this page, what will give us a lot of different results, mostly bar graphs, which aren't very useful for us. However, it sometimes is neat to look at. So I'm going to click on this green Excel spreadsheet icon. It's going to ask me to create a new sheet. I'm going to create sheet. You're welcome to change this name here to something else that you'd like. So I'll press create. Now, the form for Excel will come up like this. And this looks not like what we want in order to graph it. So we're going to have to play with it a little bit. However, once you do it a couple times, it becomes very easy and less irritating than having to put in all your data. All your data is essentially here for you already. You're just going to have to change it to percent form. So I have my timestamp here. However, I don't want to graph my timestamp. I only want the date part graphed. So I'm going to hide this timestamp, and I can hide this by double clicking or clicking with both fingers if you're on a Mac, and I can go down to hide column. I can always unhide columns if I happen to want that back. So I also don't want my therapist name graphed, so I'm going to hide that column. And what I'll do now is show you how to turn these into percentages. So I have one program here going across 3 columns: Mansford use independently, Mansford use prompted, Mansford use refusal. So I'm going to look at these 3 data points here, or these 3 columns, and I want to figure out how many of these were independent over all of the trials. And so I have 5 trials I can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 of these were independent, so I know that that's 40%. So I'm going to put my 40% in the independent column, and I'm going to just get rid of, delete the other 2 numbers in these columns. So then I'm left with my 40%. So I'll come over to my next section, which is Mans for cookie. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trials. And I know that 3 of them were independent, which means that's 60%. So I will get rid of any of the other numbers in the prompted or refusal column for those. Which brings me to my makes eye contact. And I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 trials. 1 trial was independent, so that's 20%, and I will go ahead and I will delete the other numbers in the other 2 columns. So that is it for my scale acquisition. Okay, I unhid this, I remembered, so I'm just going to hide that column again. So now I can go ahead and graph this scale acquisition. I'm going to highlight the information that I want graphed, so the date I want in there, and the scale acquisitions with the percentages. So I'll go over here, and once it's highlighted, I'm going to go to Insert, and I will insert a chart. Now my chart is inserted, but it's obviously in bar graph, and That's not very helpful for me, so I'm going to change my chart type to a line graph. Now I only have one data point, so it doesn't give me too much information, but that's okay. I will go ahead and just fix this graph up to how I would want it for the future. I can double click on it to bring it up if this wasn't already there. So I can also go into customize, and I'll want to go into vertical axis, and my maximum value I want to change to 1 to make it 100%. So it was 60, it was just changed to 100 by just going in here and putting the maximum of 1. So other things that we can do here is plot null values, which will connect your data plots if you wanted to do that. You can change your size, you can change your point shape, you can even change the color of your lines, you can change these symbols. So that is how you would go ahead and put in one of your graphs. You can also add in titles. So the title of this chart we'll call skill acquisition. You can get a little bit more specific with it if you're looking at just manding or social skills. So that's my chart title. I also want to add a horizontal axis title, so I'm going to title that session dates. And you can also add in a vertical axis line, and I want to call that percent correct or independent. So now that I have my skill acquisition data, I have my maladaptive behavior here to graph, and you can see that there are no dates here for the maladaptive behavior. So I'm going to have to add in a column and copy and paste the dates from the skill acquisition side over here to my maladaptive behavior side. So I will right click, insert one to the left, and I will come here and I will copy, control copy, and I will paste, not in that section, but right below. Now that I have my dates there, I can graph my maladaptive behaviors. So I will copy, highlight what I want to graph. So now that it's highlighted, I will insert chart. It's a bar graph, so I want to change that to a line graph. And you can see that my dates and my behaviors are not in the format that I want. I want my dates to be on the horizontal axis and also just my behaviors to be in the legend. So I'm going to switch the rows and the columns, and I'm going to change my maximum number here to one that might make more sense to my behavior. So I'll go to vertical axis, and the maximum number, I'll choose 15. And then I can go ahead and I can add in my titles. For my vertical axis, I will choose frequency. For my chart title, I will put targeted maladaptive behaviors. For my horizontal, we can put session dates. So now that I have my graphs set up the way that I want them, I will go ahead and I will get out of this Excel, this Google Excel form, and we will input another data collection into our form that we made so you can see what it comes in like, how we need to change it, and if we need to adjust our graphs any. So I'm back on my form. I'm going to just input another date. And then I'll just put in a couple different hypothetical data collections. I'll go to next. And then once I'm done, I'll press submit. I can come to where I store my form, click on responses to get back to my Excel Google form. Click on that. And then I can see that it comes in as trials per prompt level, so I'm going to have to change that like we did for our first data collection. So 5 trials, 2 of them are independent, so I know that's 40%. I'll keep that in my independent section. Now the reason why I am just keeping the number in the independent section is because if I left it in the prompted section, the graph is going to graph that prompted and refusals. You're more than welcome to keep that in there if you're looking at the amount of prompted and refusals. However, for me, I'm just looking at the independent trials. So again, you see here for my maladaptive behaviors, I need to copy and paste the date. Okay. Now that that's in there, it automatically just graphed for me my maladaptive behaviors. And my skill acquisition behaviors are also graphed. So we could play with this further to where it only shows us the selective dates. You can also change it to where it's black and white. I'm going to show you another form of mine that I have that will give us a better idea of what you can do with the graphs. So I'm going to show you a Google Form data collection graph that I've already set up, black and white with symbols, so that you can see what we can do with our graphs. They don't need to have a bunch of different colors, and they don't need to be just simply lines. We can add in different manipulations for them. So as you can see for these graphs, I've changed them to be just black and white with different symbols per a program. I can see here that these graphs are missing titles for horizontal and vertical, so that's something that I would need to add, but this is just to show you what you can do. We get rid of those grid lines also in these graphs. We'll do another training that will help us learn how to manipulate these graphs further, so that might be useful for some of us to present our graphs in ways that we prefer. So there are multiple ways to share your completed data collection sheets um, with your behavioral team. You can go up here to send and type in the email address. I'll go ahead and send it to myself just for practice. And we'll include the form and the email, and we can press send. Or I can go to preview and I can copy and paste the link and then paste it into my email to send. We also have the option to add collaborators. So once you're on your edit screen for your data collection form, you can go here to these 3-dot icon here and add collaborators. And what that means is that you are adding somebody to edit the document. So if you wanted your behavior text for whatever reason to edit them, or for to have the other behavior analyst or anybody else, you can add them in here and send it. So I hope that this training was useful for you and will help you end data collection with your staff. And I hope that we can get together to do another training on the manipulating the graphs, the different colors and symbols, etc. for presentation. So thank you so much for joining me, and I hope it was useful.